The usually composed and charming Colin Firth, known for his polite demeanor and calm British elegance, shocked fans across the country after a heated confrontation on Lorraine that ended with him being asked to leave the set. The incident, which unfolded live on ITV, has since become one of the most talked about moments in the show's history. It all began innocently enough. Lorraine Kelly had invited Colin to promote his latest film, The Price of Silence, a tense political thriller exploring corruption and truth. The actor had just returned from an exhausting international press tour, but agreed to appear on Lorraine, a show he had always praised for its warmth and lighthearted tone. When the interview started, things seemed smooth. Colin, dressed in his trademark navy suit, exchanged the usual pleasantries. Lorraine smiled and joked about his reputation as the perfect gentleman of British cinema. Colin chuckled, replying, well, my wife might have a different opinion. The audience laughed. But the tone changed when Lorraine brought up a sensitive topic, the controversy surrounding the film's production. Colin, there's been a bit of buzz about how The Price of Silence allegedly mirrors some real-life political scandals. Some people are saying it's too close for comfort. Were you aware of that during filming? She asked. Colin's smile faded slightly. Lorraine, I think it's important to separate art from reality, he said, his tone measured. The film's about integrity, not politics. Lorraine pressed on, tilting her head. But you've been known to speak out about political issues in the past. Are you saying there's no connection? That's when the atmosphere began to shift. Colin leaned forward, his expression tightening. I'm here to talk about the film, Lorraine. Not to have my personal beliefs dissected on morning television. The audience fell quiet. Lorraine, visibly surprised, tried to lighten the mood. Oh, I'm not dissecting, Colin. Just asking what people are curious about. But Colin wasn't having it. Curiosity doesn't justify intrusion, he snapped gently but firmly. I think there's a difference between a question about a role and an interrogation about my private thoughts. Lorraine blinked, taken aback. Colin, I'm hardly interrogating you. It's just a chat. His voice grew sharper. Well, it doesn't feel like a chat. It feels like you're trying to provoke a headline. The audience gasped softly. Lorraine looked off camera, clearly uncomfortable. I think we're getting a bit defensive here, she said, forcing a smile. Defensive? Colin repeated, raising his eyebrows. Perhaps. But maybe I've earned the right to defend myself after 30 years of doing interviews that confuse performance with politics. The tension was now thick enough to cut. The camera operator zoomed out slightly, perhaps to diffuse the intensity of the shot. Lorraine shifted in her seat. Colin, you've always been so open and thoughtful in past interviews. I'm just surprised by your reaction today. Colin exhaled slowly. I'm human, Lorraine. Maybe I'm just tired of being polite when people misrepresent me. A few audience members applauded softly, unsure whether to support him or not. Lorraine looked genuinely hurt but tried to steer things back on track. Let's move on to something lighter, shall we? Tell me about working with Emma Thompson again, she's wonderful, isn't she? But Colin was still visibly agitated. She is, he replied curtly, though I suspect you'll find a way to turn that into a controversy too. That was the breaking point. Lorraine's smile vanished. Colin, if you can't be respectful, we can end this conversation right now. Colin's response was icy calm. Maybe that's for the best. There was a stunned silence. Lorraine signaled the producers off camera. The live feed abruptly cut to an unscheduled commercial break, something that almost never happens on Lorraine. When the show returned, Colin Firth was gone. Lorraine appeared alone on the sofa, composed but visibly shaken. Well, she said with a tight smile, sometimes even the best guests have a bad morning. We wish Colin all the best with his film. She moved on quickly to the next segment, but the damage was done. Within minutes, social media erupted. Hashtags like hashtag Colin on Lorraine and hashtag Firth Furious began trending on X, formerly Twitter. Some viewers defended him, saying Lorraine's questions were intrusive. Others sided with her, accusing Firth of arrogance and unprofessionalism. Clips of the confrontation spread across TikTok and YouTube, garnering millions of views. Many couldn't believe that the soft-spoken star of Pride and Prejudice and the King's Speech could lose his temper so openly. By the afternoon, ITV issued a short statement. This morning's interview with Colin Firth did not go as planned. We have great respect for both Colin and Lorraine, and we wish Colin every success with his new film. Colin's representatives later released their own message, hinting that the actor felt ambushed. Mr. Firth regrets that the tone of the interview became confrontational. He had been assured that the discussion would focus on the film's creative aspects, not speculative political commentary. Behind the scenes, sources claimed Lorraine was deeply upset and felt betrayed by someone she had always admired. A producer from the show allegedly said, "We didn't expect that kind of reaction from Colin. Lorraine wasn't trying to attack him, she was just doing her job." But others whispered that this might have been the real Colin Firth, frustrated, weary, and tired of the media's constant demand for soundbites. Whatever the truth, one thing was certain: the image of the perfectly composed British gentleman had cracked, revealing a man who, like everyone else, had limits. And the fallout from that morning was only beginning. The aftermath of Colin Firth's abrupt exit from Lorraine sent shockwaves through British media. What had begun as a simple morning interview had spiraled into a full-blown public controversy, and both sides were now feeling the heat. Within hours, news outlets across the UK and beyond ran headlines like, "Colin Firth storms off live TV," and "Lorraine Kelly faces on-air meltdown." Clips of the confrontation were replayed endlessly, analyzed by commentators, and dissected by fans. Even those who hadn't watched Lorraine in years tuned in to see what could possibly make Britain's most composed actor lose control. Behind the scenes, ITV executives were in damage control mode. Lorraine Kelly, who had returned to her dressing room after the incident, reportedly sat in silence for several minutes, staring at the floor. Her longtime producer, Julie, entered carefully. "Lorraine, are you all right?" she asked softly. Lorraine sighed, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I just don't understand what happened. I wasn't trying to embarrass him." "I know," Julie replied. "But social media's going wild. Half the viewers think you went too far, half think he did." Lorraine leaned back, shaking her head. Colin Firth. Of all people. He's been on this show 5 times, and he's always been lovely. I didn't expect that. While Lorraine was processing the morning's chaos, Colin was already in his car, leaving ITV studios through a side exit to avoid reporters. His publicist, Martin Hayes, sat beside him, speaking rapidly into his phone. "Look, we'll release a statement soon," Martin said, glancing at Colin. "But you need to calm down before we do anything rash." Colin stared out the window, his reflection in the glass tight with frustration. "I shouldn't have snapped," he muttered. "But she cornered me, Martin. I'm an actor, not a politician." Martin sighed. "I get that. But Lorraine wasn't trying to ambush you. She was doing what interviewers do, press a little for reaction." Colin turned toward him sharply. "That's exactly the problem. It's never about the art anymore. It's always about reaction. The film doesn't even matter to them." For the rest of the ride, Colin stayed silent. The calm, witty gentleman adored by millions was replaced by a man visibly burdened by years of public expectation. Later that afternoon, Lorraine returned live on air to address the incident briefly. Dressed in a simple navy blouse, she began the second half of her show with a measured tone. "Now, before we move on," she said, "I just want to acknowledge what happened this morning with Colin Firth. Sometimes conversations take an unexpected turn. I've always respected Colin and his work, and I wish him the best. Let's leave it at that." The audience applauded politely. But Lorraine's eyes betrayed the strain beneath her professional calm. Meanwhile, Colin's management issued an official apology that evening. Colin Firth regrets that the interview on Lorraine became tense. He values Lorraine Kelly's long-standing support and appreciates the opportunity to discuss his work. The intensity of recent press commitments may have contributed to his reaction. It was short, formal, and carefully worded, but it didn't satisfy everyone. Many thought the apology felt forced, and others argued that Lorraine owed Colin an apology, too. The internet, of course, had its own opinion. On X, formerly Twitter, one user wrote, "Lorraine pushed too hard. Actors are not politicians. Colin handled it better than most would." Another replied, "He was rude. She's literally doing her job. If he can't handle basic questions, maybe stay off live TV." The debate raged for days. Morning shows, tabloids, and talk radio couldn't resist weighing in. Some speculated that Colin's outburst was linked to exhaustion or deeper personal frustrations. Others saw it as a rare glimpse of authenticity from a man too often trapped in his polished public image. 3 days later, Colin was spotted at the BFI Film Gala in London. The cameras flashed as he arrived, looking calm and composed once again. Reporters called out questions about Lorraine, but he smiled politely and said only, "I think everything that needed to be said has been said." However, those close to him revealed that the incident had genuinely shaken him. One friend told The Guardian, "Colin's always been the gentleman type, but that morning broke something in him. He felt misunderstood, not just by Lorraine, but by the media machine as a whole." As for Lorraine, her next show opened with noticeable caution. Her questions were gentler, her tone softer. Even she seemed aware of how fragile live interviews could become. In a private conversation with fellow ITV host Ben Shepherd, she reportedly confessed, "It made me realize how easily a few words can spiral. You think you're having a chat, but suddenly it's headlines." Weeks later, the two finally reconnected. According to insiders, Colin reached out personally, leaving a handwritten note for Lorraine at ITV. Greater than, "Dear Lorraine. I owe you more than a press release. I was wrong to let my frustration spill onto your show. You didn't deserve that. My respect for you hasn't changed. Warm regards, Colin." When Lorraine received the letter, she smiled quietly. During her next broadcast, she mentioned it without naming names. Greater than, "Sometimes, when things go wrong, what matters most is how people make them right. I got a lovely note from someone recently that reminded me of that." Viewers who had followed the drama immediately knew who she meant. In the end, the clash between Colin Firth and Lorraine Kelly became more than just a viral TV moment. It became a lesson in how fame, pressure, and human emotion can collide, even in the most polished corners of morning television. Colin returned to interviews months later, more guarded but still charming. Lorraine continued hosting, a little wiser, a little more careful. And though they never spoke about the incident publicly again, both seemed to understand that their fiery exchange had, strangely enough, made them more human in the eyes of their audience. Because sometimes, even the most graceful people lose their composure, and sometimes, that's what reminds the world they're real.